Okay, so to begin the whole process, you have to activate the cactus juice. And my activator has been sitting there for a little while. I think this cactus juice is about a year old. But as long as you don't activate it, it can have a good long shelf life. But once activated, you have to use it within a year. And you really want to keep the temperature below 85 at all times, which I have done with this. So the activator was actually a crystallized bit of stuff inside that bottle. So I'd pour out some, and then I'd pour in a little bit of cactus juice, shake it up, mix it around, and then pour it back in. And after doing this a couple times, it finally was mixed up. Now I did have little chunks of the activator in there, and the instructions said that if you have that, just let it sit for a couple hours. I let it sit overnight, and then it was good the next day. The next step was to clean up the Cholla skeletons, and most of this work was done by compressed air, probably 60 psi coming out of there, and that did a pretty good job. I did do some scraping earlier with a wire brush to get them cleaned up, and I just organized them all so I know which ones were clean and which ones were dirty. And then after that, it was laying them out inside a plastic bucket that I could use to pour the resin in. Alright, so the activator was in granule forms, but that's okay. So I was able to put that in here and fill up the little bottle with some of the cactus juice, pour it in there until everything got in there, the entire contents of that small bottle. And there were small little bits in here. It says if you have small bits there to wait for 2 hours and then shake it up again. So I just let it sit overnight. So now it looks pretty good, and this is good for about a year. So, you know, we do want to start activating it. I blew off all of my Cholla skeletons, and I added some weight here to prevent them from coming up. And all we're going to do is just pour this right on in. So. We're starting to get some of them that will pop up towards the top here. So what I'm going to do is to dissipate some of that area there. I'm going to go ahead and throw some marbles in all around. Oh, got a little carried away there with the marble thing. I'll get these marbles. And that's all these marbles' job is to just dissipate the fluid so you don't have to have so much in there, and allow it to extend above. All right, so we got a little bit of room here for the bubbles, not much, but we do have some. Set it on in. Let that start bringing up the pressure inside the tank. And we can see that we have bubbles starting to form. And we got to keep an eye on those because they will get pretty high up there. Letting the vacuum build up. So let's talk about what's happening here. We're creating a vacuum in this chamber, and all of the air that's inside the wood wants to be drawn up into the top part of the vacuum, into the chamber itself. So it's pulling all the air out of that wood. And in its place, eventually, the resin will seep into there. Now, I'm going to start a timer just to get that going. And we're going to keep track of how long it takes for all the bubbles to stop. Now, right now, you see that we don't have too much in the way of bubbles. We have some pretty good sized bubbles popping out there every once in a while, which is interesting. But we're just letting them happen until we get to full vacuum. All right, so we're getting pretty close to the sort of peaking out right there. So I'm assuming that's about as far as it's going to get. So we'll just let that go for a little bit and see
We don't really have a large buildup of bubbles, which is good. We don't want a large buildup, and none of it is seeping over, so it's all staying within my container there. And now we just pretty much let it run. And at that vacuum here, we just let it run until the bubbles stop. And whatever time that takes, we're going to double that time. We're going to turn off the pump, let it sit in the liquid. And what's going to happen is the chamber is going to equalize. We'll open it up and let it equalize back. And so all of the resin that we have in there is going to soak back into the wood. And that's the whole idea, is to get that resin in the wood. Now, the resin isn't going to harden yet. It's just going to soak back into that wood. And we'll leave it alone for a little while. And we can't even color this wood if we want to. We could actually add a dye to the pigment, which I might do next time. But this time, we'll just harden up all of our Cholla skeletons. And that way we can use them for pen blanks, bowls, whatever we want to put that in with resin. We'll just let that go. And I will come back to you when it's time for us to turn off everything and the bubbles have stopped. Okay, so we've been running for about 3 hours and 11 minutes. So if you look here now, we can see that we still have some bubbles popping up here. I could probably let it go a little bit longer if I wanted to, but I think 3 hours is plenty enough time. Well, you know, now that I said that, I see a lot more bubbles, so I think we'll come back and give it a little bit more time. Okay, it's been 5 hours and 30 minutes, and I still have some tiny bits of bubbles coming up, but I'm going to call it on this one. I think whatever benefit I'm going to get will be perfect for me on these ones. So I'm going to go ahead and release the pressure here, the vacuum, and the cactus juice is already sucked in quite a bit, so this should be interesting to see how much further it goes down. So I'm going to slowly release the pressure here. And hopefully everything stays covered, because that's the main thing you want, is to have everything covered as the pressure draws down. And I can see that the liquid level is going down quite a bit already. So it has dropped down. I do have one that looks like it might be coming over. Let me just move this off here for a sec. See if I can lift this lid off, which I can. It's got quite a bit of drops on it. But as you can see in here, the one branch is showing through, so that's too bad. But it's dropped down quite a bit from that edge, so I think I'm going to add a little bit more cactus juice here if I can. Pour it in there. I might add a little bit of bubbles into it. I don't know if that's a good thing, but we got it back up to level. The idea now is to leave it sit for twice as long as what it took to get all the bubbles out, or most of them. So I'm going to let this sit here in the pot for a good 10 hours. So I think tomorrow morning I will go ahead and take that all out. So I think I'll clean up the pot a little bit before I close it up. You can see the moisture that accumulated down at the bottom there. So some moisture has accumulated, but I will clean up this from all the bubbles popping when they pop off that and just circle around. So anyway, I will clean that up and let that sit and bring you back tomorrow morning when I pull the stuff out. Now, okay, so it's the next morning. I let this sit all night, so I had plenty enough time to soak in. All right, so I'm gonna pull these off. I want to save as much of the resin as possible. And yeah, none of these seem to want to float in the resin. Do feel a bit heavier. I mean, you know, it's not, well, this one definitely is noticeable. It's interesting, this one is still floating. This one right here. It's been under the water the whole time, but it still floats. The rest did not. Dry these off a little bit, not too much, before I put them in the oven. Now the reason I'm drying them is oil, or many things I've seen, be able to put them in aluminum foil. and they tend to stick to it. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm drying them off some, because I think really the resin that I want is the stuff that's permeated into the wood. That's the stuff that I want to harden up and stay there. Possible drips may not be a bad thing. Okay, so the next thing is to put this all into the oven here. And I have a temperature gauge because every YouTube channel says that these things are inaccurate. So I set it at about 210, and we'll see how accurate that is. And we'll put this right here in the middle, and our little catch pan here with all the aluminum foil drip pan right underneath there, and we'll let that sit there. Now the most I can put it is 99 minutes, so we'll have to come back and change that, but we have, after about 2 hours, this should be hardened enough to take it out. We let it cool, and then we're done. And the process, this particular resin hardens by heat, and it has to be at least 200 degrees. I have it at 210. We'll see what the temperature gauge gets up to. Okay, so as you can see by the brightness, I moved this outdoors, and I waited until the temperature gauge got over 200 in there. And when I open this, you see that it smokes quite a bit. And the temperature gauge is at 210 right now. And so you do get a smell inside the shop, so I'd recommend doing this outside if you don't want the smell, or someplace where you can vent pretty good. So what I'm gonna do is increase my time to 90 seconds, and then come back in about a half hour and add another 30 minutes to that, and that'll give me my 2 hours. So this is going to go ahead and cook outside for a couple hours now. So here's our finished stabilized cholla, and you can see we've got a little bit of residue there that we got to sort of peel off there, but very little extra on there. Letting them dry a little bit, and taking care of that is a much better plan, I think, than wrapping it in the aluminum foil. I think it comes out cleaner. Now, I can tell you this, that these things are rock solid. They're like rocks. The cholla wood is, the skeletons are pretty solid, and when you put them in resin, I think if you use resin and you first put it in the vacuum chamber and let some of the resin soak in there, and then let the resin cure, that would probably work pretty good. But this really does strengthen these up. Now the advantage now is that when I use them in resin, this is going to have the same hardness as the resin, so when you're turning, you're not going to hit these soft spots in the resin. It'll be consistent as you turn, which helps out. Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary, but it does make it a little bit easier. You can absolutely use these in resin, and I use them to make pen blanks and other things, and I've used them all the time without any stabilization. But if you have it, it does make it better. And even though I was able to break that little bit, man, I really had to push on that. So these things are really, really tough. So this one's going to be a rock. So that's stabilization. That's what it does for your wood. It takes punky wood and makes it much tougher. I think the next thing I'm going to try to do is I want to go ahead and stabilize these with some dye and actually change the color of the wood. So we'll talk about that in the next video. But I appreciate you all following along now. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy the channel, and we'll see you around in the next one. And I will pretty soon, I will probably be doing a video here relatively quickly on casting these in resin and then turning something out of them so you can see the finished results. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.